The Women in Standards extends a warm welcome to our panel, workshop presenters, and participants. Today, we'll be discussing engaging stakeholders, lessons learned from member onboarding and retention. Outreach to the stakeholder community can involve in-person interactions, calls, emails, and social media outreach, and more. It is essential to inviting a diverse and robust community of stakeholders to the standards process. Once a new participant has joined a standards body, supporting them as they become acclimated is doubly important to ensure their long-term success. And finally, how can we better retain and inspire participants to work with standards developers long-term? We hope to explore these topics today, and thank you for joining us. For today's discussion, I welcome three leading experts in the standards industry. Sarah Desautel, Director of ISO P Membership Services at ANSI, Katerina Koperna, Technical Committee Operations Manager at ACM, and Lisa Trofe, Managing Director at JPMA. Our first panelist today is Katerina Koperna. Katerina is the Technical Committee Operations Manager at ASTM. In that role, Katerina manages 5 technical committees, including Soil and Rock, Amusement Rides and Devices, Commercial Spaceflight, Quality and Statistics, and Polishes. Additionally, Katerina oversees the organization's Emerging Professionals Program and serves as the ASTM representative on the American National Standards Institute's ISO Council and ISO Forum. Katerina, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Karen, and welcome to all of the attendees today. I'm excited to be participating in this panel and hope that I can learn today as well as share some of ASTM's experiences with you. So before I get into the meat of my presentation, I just wanted to ground you in some information about ASTM International. We are one of the largest US-based standards development organizations with more than 12,000 standards published, a 30,000 membership base, 148 technical committees that represent more than 90 industries. Our headquarters is just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we have satellite offices around the globe, including Belgium, Beijing, and Peru. ASTM is actually unique in that we are open to all interested stakeholders at a very low entry rate of $75. In addition to standards, ASTM provides wraparound services for technical experts, which include proficiency testing, certification, technical training, and our flagship product, Compass, which is an access point for corporate subscriptions of standards, trainings, and collaboration points. Can you go to the next slide? ASTM International is nearly 125 years old. So like many other mature volunteer-based organizations, one of our long-term strategic business objectives is organizational vitality. When we started to peel back the onion, we knew that there was a lot of work that needed to be done. We identified some key areas pretty quickly, and we began to look at how we could utilize our resources to tackle some of the gaps. As a high priority item, we wanted to make sure we were engaging the next generation of technical experts in a meaningful way. This led to the Emerging Professionals Program in 2015. Next slide, please. So the EP program, as we call it, started like many other things in ASTM. We started a pilot program so we could dip our toes in and see if this was something that the membership was going to see value in and if they were going to support it. What we weren't expecting is just how quickly the program took on a life of its own and gained momentum. Next slide. So as you can see from the slide that you have on your screen, when we started in 2015, sorry, I'm just going to make this a little bigger here so I can see it. We had just I think we had 1 workshop that year, and we had about 5 participants in the workshop. And then in 2016, we had 1 more workshop with 5 participants. And the feedback was pretty good in terms of the attendees. But what we quickly realized was we needed to kind of put this framework around what the program was going to be. So the program itself is, it has an application process where anybody from our membership can nominate another member or a student member to participate. And if you are selected, which we're selecting 10 emerging professionals a year, you receive round trip airfare up to up to $475, a 2-night hotel stay, and you get to participate in our emerging professionals workshop. The actual workshop itself was started in conjunction with a consultants organization that came together with us, McKinley Advisors, to help us sort of build on what we thought was going to be the most valuable for the members. So the first thing we did was we had an ASTM portion of that workshop. And so it was 3 hours dedicated to really diving into ASTM, who we are as an organization, how the process works, and how to navigate once you're in a committee. So like Karen said in her introductory remarks, it's one thing to have 30,000 members, but how do you support every single one of those members so that they're seeing value in their participation within ASTM? And that's really where we thought this program added that piece of it early on for our membership. And so, as I said, we started out with 10 emerging professionals. They all had to come in through an application and be selected. So we have an internal group, depending on what committee the nomination comes from. Then we invite that staff person in, and then we have another small group, and everyone gets together and we sort of go through each nomination to pick out the top 10. But what quickly happened after we launched the program full time was that companies didn't want the money. They didn't want the $475 round trip. They didn't care about the 2 nights in the hotel. What they wanted was their staff people to get up to speed as quickly as possible, to make contacts so they knew how to navigate the process. And so they would say to us, even though my person didn't get selected, can we still pay for them to participate in the program because we see so much value in it? So we were able to be flexible in that we picked 10, and then the folks that we weren't able to select, we gave them the opportunity to go to their supervisors or their companies and get that additional support. So that was something that changed pretty quickly in the early years of the program. And then the second half of the program, after the first 3 hours focusing on ASTM, we had McKinley Advisors come in as our consultant, and they actually run about a 3 hour, it depends on the content and the group. If they're a more chatty group, they go over leadership and some soft skills. And this part of the program there's an activity within it that has really driven home what it means to gain consensus. And we always hear from the participants that portion of the presentation really is impactful, and it makes them step back and understand what consensus means, how they're going to participate, how are you going to meet in the middle when it's your competitor sitting at a table with you and you disagree on, the specific technical requirement, and it's going to be impactful to both of your businesses. How are you actually going to meet in the middle? And so that's sort of how we wrap up the day. But we talk about communication styles, and we talk about, just self-reflection and all of those good things that, individuals need in their career, but they're going to bring it into their volunteer work as well, which is in turn ASTM. So after we conclude our day, we invite the ASTM president in and our board chair, and they come in and give the emerging professional certificates for completing the program and thank them. And we usually give them a nice goodie bag, and that's always well received. And that's how we started out the program. But again, we sort of changed things, right? So after I took over the program and we had our first full year, which was 4 workshops a year, we quickly realized that we needed another touch point with the emerging professionals. So yes, they go through this workshop and it's basically 2 days because we have a cocktail reception the night before, but then after they're done and they get their certificate, they kind of just go back into the mix of the committees, and it's up to the committees and the staff person of that committee to really continue to engage those folks. So I wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to track them and what they're doing in their committees after they leave the program to see if our efforts are valuable. And also I wanted to have this extra touch point. So we came up with the Strengths Finders Assessment, which is really popular. It's done by Gallup, a very well-known research and assessment firm. And so we have now offered about 6 months. It depends on the timing of when the actual EP workshop happens. But we reach out to them and offer all of the graduated EPs that participated the opportunity to now come back and participate in a virtual workshop and get the Strengths Finders Assessment for free through ASTM. So it's just like another $25 value, but a lot of our EPs really appreciate this because it gives you insights into who you are as a professional and a person and how that can reflect or translate into your volunteer efforts and your work. Next slide, please. So here are some of the stats over the years. So we have had 21 workshops since 2015. So we have 4 a year now after we had started with the pilots, and we have them in 2 in June at different committee weeks. And then we have October and November. We have 167 emerging professionals that have gone through the program. And we see these emerging professionals as really the next generation of technical experts. So we didn't put an age range on the application, but we're just kind of framing it of where you are in your career. So if you're in a technical field and you've been in that technical field for 1 to 10, we say 1 to 7, but we accept pretty much everyone because some people have had a career change. So we try to be flexible in how we're seeing and evaluating who's an emerging professional. But that's kind of how we framed, who those folks are. And then out of the EPs that were nominated, we had them representative of 88 of our committees, which represents 59% of our committees, which we thought was a really great statistic to share, just to show how many of our committees have really started to get engaged and are putting forth new experts that will in turn be our future committee leaders, right? And so then we had to date, because we only started the Strengths Finders assessment in the last 2 years. So we've had 35 EPs participate in the Strengths Finders assessment. Next slide, please. And I mentioned a little bit ago that I really wanted to start tracking the emerging professionals after they graduated the program. And so I have to do this manually, but it's a really great reflection of the program and what value these members are bringing into their committee work. So right now we have 194 work items registered by emerging professionals. So that technically, if a work item is like a draft standard, so or a revision to a standard. So that's quite a lot. We have 19 emerging professionals that were from outside of the United States, which is also important to us to have the global perspective. We have 72 EPs that are holding leadership positions, and that's a whole realm of things that I listed there. We have 1 EP that's on one of our standing committees, so sort of like a policy committee that they review things that happen amongst the other committees. And then we have 17 EPs that have received committee awards. So not only did they, were they identified, nominated, and selected for the Emerging Professionals program, but their colleagues in the technical committee are recognizing their value as a member and within the committee, which we also think is a great reflection of the program. Next slide, please. So ongoing efforts for the program include a LinkedIn page just for the emerging professionals that have gone through the program. I mentioned the Gallup Strengths Finders assessment, and those 2 things. LinkedIn has been good because we can keep in touch with them. Like if there's a message that I want to put out, or if there was an article in our magazine, I can highlight it through the LinkedIn page, but hasn't gained as much traction as I would like. So hopefully today I'll learn some tips from the other ladies of what we might do to enhance that. Again, the Strengths Finders assessment has been really well received. It also is giving us the additional resource that after they take the assessment and they receive their top 5 strengths, we have access to those. So one of the things that I was interested in, and we need more of a case study for this, we need more numbers for our case study, is that I was curious to see if our EPs are going to have some similar strengths, and we're going to start seeing themes in their strengths. It'll be interesting to see how that research plays out, but right now we're just at a point where we don't have enough detail to kind of fill that chart yet. And then we at ASTM we really try to highlight our onboarding and training materials that already do exist. So we, as part of the conclusion of the Emerging Professionals program, when we're in person, we usually provide a lot of information in a folder that they can sort of take along with them and have. But we have onboarding and training page of our website, and we do a lot of trainings of our processes, of the web pages, of different things via WebEx. And so We point them to that. We remind them when we have trainings available and when they're coming up. And then we also have a lot of one-pagers and checklists and things that we as staff thought would be helpful to our members as they try to take on the different responsibilities that you can gain in a technical committee. And so with that, I think that's all I have for my prepared remarks on the program. And I'm sure I missed a few things. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take those. Or if we're waiting until the end, Karen.
Yeah, Katerina, such great talking points, and I've written down lots of notes. And I think one follow-up I have would be, can you share in regards to the 3 hours that ASTM covers, what are the types of things that you include in that part of the training?
Thank you, Karen. So we start out with a really 50,000 foot view of what is ASTM, because we really feel like you have to have context. A lot of members come into their committee and they see it as just, they have these blinders on that it's just all about amusement rides and they don't see the bigger picture. So sometimes we feel like there's value in understanding the bigger picture ASTM and what headquarters is working on, what our priorities are. So we start out sort of with that information, but then in ASTM technical committees, all standards go through a balloting process and they have to reach consensus. And there are a lot of nuances to the system and how the balance works. Classification of members, who's assigned to vote, who isn't assigned to vote, how do they vote, what happens after they vote if they are a dissension. So all of those kinds of topics are covered in the presentation, and we really try to take our time and go in depth to each of those areas. We also try to explain how they can engage in the committee at a meeting, because it can be difficult. When you come into a room of people that have been together for 20 years and they just get on like, how's your mom, how's your sister? And they're just, there's this comfortableness of folks that have been participating for so long. And if you're one of these younger, newer members, that doesn't always feel the most inclusive. And so we kind of give some guidance to volunteer. We kind of explain how we see it, that they can engage pretty quickly at the ground level and sort of build that confidence to be able to be more vocal in meetings and willing to volunteer for different things that come up.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. And everyone else, if you have follow-ups, feel free to hold them and we'll have an open discussion at the end, but very informative and gave me a lot of ideas. All right, next we welcome Lisa Trofe, who serves as the Managing Director for the Juvenile Product Manufacturers Association. In this role, Lisa oversees the trade association's membership and product safety programming, including the certification program, and actively engages with the Consumer Product Safety Commission, ASTM International, the American National Standards Institute, and ISO to support the juvenile product industry. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Karen. I too am so pleased to be here today talking with all of you and learning from my colleagues and looking forward to our discussion later. Katerina shared some great information, and I think you'll hear some similar themes from me today as well. So next slide, please. And so I wanted to share a little bit of background information about JPMA and how we engage in a standard development process and standard development organizations, because I think that really will be helpful in understanding some of the information that I'll share towards the end. So the Juvenile Products Manufacturers Association, we're a North American trade association. We advocate for safety, support our members, and act as a comprehensive source of product information and education. Next slide, please. So JPMA is really the voice of the industry in advocacy efforts on the federal and state level. And we also work to advance product safety, as Karen mentioned, internationally. We work with ISO, ANSI, we work with Health Canada as well. And, but we're not just government relations. We really try to proactively represent the core values of our industry and our members, which is quality and safety for baby products. And we also have a product certification program, which I'll talk a little bit more about in depth because it really lends itself to how and why we engage with ASTM and how we encourage our members to do the same. So the certification program provides tremendous benefits to different stakeholder groups, not just our members or manufacturers, but consumers, retailers, and regulators as well. We also work with our members to provide opportunities so that they can promote their brands to consumers and the media as well in different ways throughout the year. Next slide. So I'll take just a minute to expand on the certification program a little bit. And so as you see on the screen, we currently have 29 different product categories in our certification program that does expand organically as ASTM standards are published, which I will talk a little bit about. And the program is based on ASTM standards, but also includes federal, state, and retailer requirements as well. And so because our program is, and always has been, foundationally built on those ASTM standards, JPMA staff really plays a unique role within ASTM and the ASTM subcommittees that make up the juvenile products industry. So that'll be the primary focus of my remarks here today. Next slide, please. So, we all here on the phone understand standards development and how things work for sure, but I included this slide because I really wanted to highlight of all these things, the third bullet. So standard development organizations and the process as a whole is meant to be inclusive, right? And in fact, it has to be, or it just doesn't work. So for the juvenile products industry and our members who participate in standard development activities, we see our role as helping to facilitate that engagement and that participation. Next slide. And, we facilitate that for, again, the benefit of all of the stakeholders in our industry, in our certification program. And, just really quickly, those benefits for certification include, a level of confidence for consumers who are looking to buy baby products, and they can look for the certification seal and have an understanding that that product has been, tested to some very stringent standards. For our manufacturers, we're providing a turnkey testing solution and a degree of liability protection, right? So they know that their products have been tested to really everything that's required to be sold in the United States. For the regulators, we work to establish relationships and maintain relationships with the agencies that oversee our industry as well. And that provides, their awareness that our members are the good guys, right? They're doing the right thing. They're testing their products. They're not the counterfeit products that we see popping up here and there on different platforms. And finally, retailers, again, they're being provided a level of confidence that those products they're giving shelf space to have been tested, can be trusted, and are really adhering to the most stringent safety standards that exist. Next slide. So JPMA and ASTM, how we work together, and we have a really long history of 40 plus years now that the association has been working very closely with ASTM. We are separate entities, but we work very closely to promote product safety, again, to the benefit of all of those stakeholder groups that I just talked about. JPMA, as I mentioned, serves a unique role within ASTM in that we serve as the facilitator for all 30 plus juvenile product subcommittees that currently exist. And we do this for a lot of reasons, and I will share those on my next slide, but the primary reason is that allows us, and by default our members, to stay up to date on what's happening in standard development and product safety, and not just up to date, but to stay ahead of it. Juvenile products, as you all can imagine, is an extremely highly regulated industry. So it's increasingly important for our members and us as the association to stay engaged in that process and stay ahead of what's happening. Next slide. So what does that mean? That unique role that I mentioned a couple of times. And Katarina can maybe weigh in and let me know if any other industries do this, but from the perspective of JPMA, we formally are listed as a co-chair of all of the committees that fall within the juvenile product purview. And we do have a dedicated staff member that sits in that seat. For 5 or 6 years, that was me. And I have, since moved on, but continue to remain very engaged in ASTM, attend all the meetings, and am chairing a subcommittee myself as well. So part of that is managing the logistics, which typically is activity that falls to either the chair of the particular subcommittee or the technical committee operations manager, the staff manager for each group. But we do that for the industry. And the staff person in that seat manages all of the logistics for the meetings. We oversee the task groups. We prepare all the documentation, agenda packets. We draft the minutes. We manage the roster maintenance process. And really, we do that as a service to the industry because that's, a significant amount of bandwidth required for somebody to really raise their hand and want to volunteer to take on the role of a task group lead or a subcommittee chairman. And because we do that for our industry, it makes it a little bit easier for somebody to be willing to step into that role. And, we heard great information from Katarina about the EP program. And, that's something that I found very interesting, especially because we are an industry that is looking to continue to groom some of those younger members and some of those emerging professionals, because we are a bit of an aging industry, and we want to make sure that we have folks who are willing to take that step. And I'll share a little bit more about how we do that as well. So next slide. This is really the down and dirty of what I wanted to talk about, how as the trade association, we really help to facilitate the connections and help our members stay and get engaged in the standards development work. So from the very beginning of a juvenile product or baby product manufacturer coming to JPMA to say, who are you, what do you do, how can you help me? Our membership team really starts conversations talking about ASTM and the standards work that we can help them get involved with. And it's a terrific networking opportunity. It's a terrific educational opportunity. And we talk about it a lot, not just when we're sort of selling membership, but also when new members join and we want to get them quickly acclimated to what's going on in the industry. Attending an ASTM meeting in your product category is probably the best way that any product manufacturer can do that. And so we talk about that a lot with our new members. The juvenile product subcommittees and standards are very category specific. So I mentioned earlier, there's 30 plus product category standards within our sort of portfolio. Whereas, for example, the toy association, the toy industry has one standard for hundreds of products. So we're really able to share with our members that little bit of a deeper dive, that when they are going to get engaged in an ASTM process or standards development work, they're really going to be able to make those connections with other companies who are in the same space as them, which is really helpful, especially for a lot of the smaller companies or those who are just entering the baby space, because it provides that opportunity again for networking, for learning from one another, for getting a real feel for what's happening within that space and the industry. And so I mentioned that JPMA has a staff person who really sits in this seat and fulfills this unique role. And some of the things that we do once a member is sort of ingrained with the association and wants to understand what's going on in the product category and standard development work, is to make a connection between the appropriate folks at that member company and the subcommittee chair for that particular product category. So a simple email from me or one of my colleagues to the new member, connecting them to the subcommittee chair, just makes a warm connection. So that the first meetings that our members are attending, there's a familiar name or face. Are we in person? Are we still, Zooming at meetings? But provides a little bit of warmth so that there's an opportunity to feel a little bit more comfortable participating in the process. Katerina mentioned the trainings that ASTM does. They are phenomenal, and we talk about them a lot as well. We promote the trainings in our member communications, and we strongly encourage participation in them when someone is new to the process, but especially when they may be considering taking on a task group lead position or a subcommittee chair role. So again, we're talking about that a lot and getting our members familiar with what's available to them to help ease that fear factor a little bit of getting involved. We talk about the process a lot. And again, we do serve as sort of co-chair for all of those committees in our space. And that leaves us pretty knowledgeable about what's happening at any given time in a particular product category so that we can share that information with the interested parties from our membership base. Communication, again, we really try to share the benefits as much as we can. And, I think the most important thing that we do as the trade association and the staff of JPMA for our members to facilitate engagement is to almost be the social director, if you will, at ASTM meetings. So we go to the meetings, we scan the room, we see, are there new faces here? Are there people who maybe have been gone for a while and are just coming back? And we introduce them to their peers. We create those connections because, as Katerina said, standards can be intimidating, especially if you're new to the industry or, new to your role in the company. And this is the first time you're sort of engaging in this work. Most of the folks in the room have been around for a long time. They are asking about each other's kids and your last vacation, etc. And so to walk into that process can be very intimidating. And I think we help ease that a bit by making those introductions and ensuring that there's familiar faces in the room that can really make the process a little less intimidating and help people engage. And so next slide, please. Just wanted to share sort of an anecdote about how those activities that we just talked about on the previous slide can translate into reality. And so this slide here doesn't have a lot of information, but I wanted to sort of tease out the story a bit and just share that the product category of infant bedding, of which Crib Bumpers is a part, is the subcommittee that I'm currently chairing at ASTM. And though I've been, sort of engaged in the process for a while, stepping into the chairmanship role for the committee was, even for me, someone who'd been involved in for a long time, extremely intimidating. I understood the process, but when you have to sit in the front of the room, it's a whole different story and, navigate the process. So this was a very contentious sort of product category. And it was a standard that had sort of stagnated for a few years. There was banning legislation for several states and a couple of municipalities to not allow crib bumpers to be sold in those various places. And quite a bit of advocacy work to make that happen. And the resulting media attention really gave some major retailers pause. And these products were taken off the shelves. But we have a contingent of our JPMA membership who is in this product space. And so, we felt it fair to represent the perspective of the big picture. And so, again, fairly contentious kind of issue with a number of different viewpoints who, all want to be heard and should be heard. And that's the point of the standards development process. And so, you see on the left sort of traditional crib bumper, that's where the standards sort of lay for quite some time. But as the market continued to change based on those types of activities, different types of products started to appear on the market, like the one you see in the middle, which is more of a mesh type liner product. And finally, we have a significant contingent of stakeholders in the process who advocate for the product to not be used or available at all. So navigating that process really was sort of an overwhelming proposition. But it was because the work that we do on a regular basis to create those connections and to build and maintain those relationships with all the various stakeholder groups, not just members, but everyone else participating in the process as well, like agency representatives and advocates as well, that we were able to really drive the process forward and navigate those contentious issues. We were able to create engagement because we had spent time building trust and had gained respect of the folks in the room who are engaging in this process. And we were able to have those candid discussions to get those issues out on the table and find the best path forward. Something I've heard a lot in the standards development world is that everyone goes away a little disappointed at the end of the day because we all have to compromise when we're coming to the table to create these standards that are going to serve entire industries. And again, I think that it really serves the point that creating the relationships and building that trust and respect by ongoing engagement, however you can make that happen, is really the way to get things done. And that leaves everyone feeling good at the end of the day when the contentious issues can be resolved and the work is done, the standards revised, and it just sets up for positive future moving forward. And I think I would just close by sharing that again, sort of to tag on to Katarina's point, it can be intimidating to engage in the standards development work. There's a tremendous amount of resources that we can all rely on, like the Emerging Professionals Program, like ASTM training. And certainly, no matter what industry you're representing, your trade association can certainly help smooth that process by making introductions or, providing sort of a lay of the land to reduce that intimidation factor a bit. And so I would encourage everyone to look into that as well. Your trade association is always there to help. And with that, I think the next slide has my contact information there for anyone who'd like to reach out, and happy to turn it back over to you, Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, so much. It's very interesting to see it from the industry perspective, and certainly unique because the standards that you're supporting have a lot of emotions related to them. Safety and children's products emote a lot of personal reasons for participation. And I'm curious because you said you did chair a committee, and I think that's a unique perspective. What lessons learned did you come from it that would help either in identifying a future leader of a committee or maybe enticing someone to participate with the hopes that they'll be a new leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly, lessons learned are that it is intimidating. Like I said, I've been involved for a really long time, and still, taking that leadership role was a little bit overwhelming. I think that what I would share is participating in the training and the resources that ASTM offers is a great way to get to know other individuals who may be in the same boat, and to really rely on those connections of folks who have been around for a little bit longer, because they are practiced and proficient in navigating that workflow. And diplomacy is the real, I think, key soft skill, if you will, for taking on some of those leadership roles, because there are so many varying viewpoints, which again is why these standards are great, because the perspectives represented are very broad. I think those are the most important things to think about, and baby steps. Honestly, raise your hand in a meeting and make some comments, and participate in task groups, and maybe eventually take on the role of task group lead. That's smaller groups that are focused on very specific issues, and getting comfortable at those various levels can really help in considering taking on the role of a subcommittee chair or vice chair.
Excellent. Yeah, no, very helpful. Certainly some food for thought, I think, for everybody listening in. All right. And our final speaker today, we welcome Sarah Desitels. Sarah is the Director of ISO P Membership Services at the American National Standards Institute. She holds management oversight of the ANSI ISO team that facilitates the work of all ANSI accredited U.S. technical advisory groups, U.S. tags, and ANSI delegated U.S. held ISO secretariats. So welcome, Sarah. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, and thank you all for your time today. I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to be part of today's session. Before I get into the topic of recruitment and retention, I too just want to give a brief overview and some background on ANSI itself. So next slide. So within the global standards landscape, ANSI is a unique organization. The Institute is a private nonprofit 501c3 organization that administers and coordinates the U.S. voluntary standardization and conformity assessment system. Founded in 1918, our activities are conducted as a partnership between the public and the private sectors, with the private sector taking the lead. ANSI represents U.S. stakeholders as the umbrella organization for the U.S. voluntary consensus standards community. So there are a lot of, you can see there what ANSI is and what ANSI isn't, and I really wanted to highlight what the main misconceptions are about ANSI. We are not a standards developer, and we are not a product certifier or a product tester, and we are not a government agency. We provide a framework for fair standards development through our accreditation process, and we also offer a neutral venue for coordination of standards-based solutions. Through our various memberships, partnerships, and diverse programs and activities, we represent the interests of more than 270,000 companies and organizations and 30 million professionals worldwide. Next slide. Let's see here. So ANSI is the sole U.S. representative to the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, and through the U.S. National Committee, USNC, to the International Electrotechnical Commission, or IEC. In this role, we provide access for U.S. stakeholders to participate in ISO and IEC standardization activities. But for today's discussion, I'm going to mainly focus on ANSI's ISO engagement because that's my primary job responsibility. U.S. participation in ISO is facilitated by ANSI through the accreditation, as Karen said in my introduction, through the accreditation of U.S. technical advisory groups, or what we call tags, which many of you may already be familiar with. In the universal world, tags are also known as mirror committees, and so they are interchangeable, but tag is what is recognized in the U.S. as reference to our accredited groups. What tags are, they're comprised of relevant experts from a broad range of U.S. stakeholder categories. They work together to develop a U.S. consensus position in a specified ISO committee, and they also select U.S. experts to serve as delegates to go forward and participate internationally at the ISO table. And they also determine whether or not ANSI wishes to assume leadership roles in ISO committees. Because they are under the ANSI umbrella and they represent ANSI internationally, it is our responsibility to ensure we have the right people at the table, developing a consensus-based U.S. position and taking that forward. Next slide, please. So ANSI conducts its own outreach for recruitment when a new project is proposed at ISO to gauge U.S. interest on whether or not we want to participate and ultimately establish a new U.S. tag. And once a U.S. tag is formed, we support and guide that tag on the administrative process, but we also assist them with their recruitment and efforts. There are methods that we use internally for our own recruitment efforts, but also they kind of are the same ones that we recommend to our tags to supplement their membership. So planning is essential to the outreach process. It includes mapping out the strategy with specific assignments of outreach roles. So we divvy up different outreach roles amongst the team members. And also establishing a timeline with key deadlines along with a tracking mechanism to document what efforts have been completed to date and which ones are ongoing. Conducting research and landscaping the targeted expert pool will completely help with the focus of our outreach efforts. Determining who are the key players that are in your sector and that have expertise to contribute. Keep in mind that there's a committee balance aspect to ensure a well-rounded representation of the sector. ANSI requires accredited tags to avoid dominance by any one interest category. And so consider all interest categories for a balanced membership, such as producers, consumers, government, general interest, and consortia. This spectrum of representation gives credibility to the voluntary consensus standards process. Develop a wish list. Identify the prominent leaders in the industry. Who are the must-haves at the table, and prioritize the outreach efforts. Take a look at the quality of the participants that you're engaging versus the number of participants. It's great to have a large committee, but you need to ensure that the key players are there that will be engaging and provide the valuable contributions needed. Having an effective leadership team of a group is critical. I cannot stress this enough. Without invested and engaging leaders to drive the work and also motivate the committee members, the work's just not going to get done. Next slide, please. So when we begin our recruitment efforts, we first look at our current and available resources for contacts to publicize the activity and gain attention, whether it's internal or through our member resources. We look to see if there's any relevant US domiciled standards activities in the specific space and reach out. We use various means to promote the proposed activities, such as social media, current internal committee membership rosters, and any relevant trade associations. Having materials developed and ready to use in your toolkit is extremely important. We find that a one-pager often works well. I think Katarina also spoke about having one-pagers. They work well to hook the interest of prospective members. We develop those one-pagers with the help of our committee leaders, and they're formatted in such a way that they can be easily tailored to any particular audience or event. Highlighting the importance of their participation, of a member's participation, is a really powerful message. So what's at stake if they're not at the table? This can be very motivational for potential members when they realize that others may be developing standards that will impact their business. So you really want to encourage them to get in the game and not just stand on the sidelines. So once we have their initial interest, how do we actually engage with prospective members? Well, we hold group webinars that focus on some of the major aspects of the efforts underway, as well as the overall benefits of participation, including those not normally discussed relative to the standards development processes, like the networking opportunities and intelligence gathering. We additionally rely on committee leaders or existing members to participate in one-on-one calls with prospective members to discuss the technical work and sector-specific needs for standardization. So these calls can provide a more detailed discussion on how the work can impact prospective members' organizations, focusing on projects that would be of specific interest to them. And we also find that peer-to-peer outreach and recruitment seems to be much more effective. So engaging TAG members in outreach is really important as well. Again, we rely on both internal and external resources to promote and invite prospects to these informational sessions so that we can cast the widest net possible. We also ensure to keep a list of all the interested contacts for future outreach efforts. Next slide, please. Recruitment efforts should never stop. As you know, it's an ongoing process. As committee work progresses, there will be evolving projects, and that's going to lead to, for new subject matters to be identified, subject matter experts. So you're going to need to bring them to the table as the work evolves within the committee. We encourage our tags to have a standing agenda item on recruitment so that it's on everyone's mind, and make it known that they too are now ambassadors of the work, and they should always be looking for new participants on their own through their resources and contacts as well. And again, we encourage the one-on-one calls, the personal outreach and a phone conversation, really much more effective than just an email, which can be kind of cold in some senses. Also, having new members joining your committee is a great way to keep current members engaged and participating. New networking opportunities and engaging with peers in your sector encourages members to want to stay involved. So that's kind of my segue into the next section, which will talk about member retention. Next slide, please. Retaining existing members is just as important as recruiting new ones. I think we all realize that. Having the new member orientation calls is a great tool that gives new members the opportunity to really get a feel for the committee work, but also for leadership to engage with them, to understand where they need mentoring and how to get them to a comfort level to fully participate. You don't want these members to feel so intimidated at a committee meeting that they don't contribute. These calls are also a great way to have longer term members participate and discuss their experiences. Establish mentoring relationships wherever possible. So pairing new members with existing members provides a number of benefits, such as introducing the new participant to the committee culture. And the longer term members are also somewhat flattered to be seen as a mentor. Encouraging committee members to take leadership roles for a project is a great retention tool. Some members don't always have the comfort level or confidence to nominate themselves to take on a lead role, even though they have the technical capabilities. Once they take on the leadership role, they tend to stay actively engaged. You could also potentially propose a co-led effort with another committee member that would implement the mentoring approach as well. Outreach to inactive members should be done as soon as you start to see a decline in participation. In some committees, there are participation requirements that need to be met. So before they default on those requirements and you simply eliminate them from the roster, make sure you understand what's causing the decline in their participation. Is it a lack of time to commit, or do they feel that the work is no longer benefiting them? Either way, it's important for you to know so that adjustments can be made to the committee work to re-engage them and actually reduce the risk of others potentially dropping off. And also work to identify maybe an alternate. If it's a time constraint that they can't dedicate to the meetings, maybe work with them and see if they can identify an alternate that could participate on their behalf when they have scheduling conflicts. And lastly, formal recognition is amazing. And, when you recognize a committee member's efforts and contributions, it's such a great retention tool. Many of our members are doing this work on top of their daily jobs, and the value of their participation is not always tangible. So just a really nice thing to do, but also can be very important as a retention tool. So retention efforts really need to begin from the moment a member joins. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of issues and concerns that we hear from US stakeholders that can impede their participation in committee work. So as I noted earlier, most people have their core job responsibilities in addition to their committee work, and that can be a challenge for them to prioritize. Ultimately, if their organization sees the value of their participation, they will hopefully make the adjustments needed to support the extra time to participate in the committee work. And also, as I mentioned, naming an alternate could be a solution. Support from a home organization. So while the technical experts may see and really understand the value of their participation, the benefit is not always apparent to those at the top of the org chart that are making the financial decisions on staff resources and travel budgets. When we get back to traveling. This it was probably one of the most frequent issues that we were hearing from our members, which prompted ANSI to partner with some of its members to develop a site solely dedicated to the promotion of standards work and the benefits to all that participate. So the website is called standardsboostbusiness.org, and it's a very detailed, comprehensive site that includes testimonials and a toolkit for those that are looking for materials to use when explaining and educating others on the benefits of standardization to businesses. Participation fees is another issue that can be problematic for smaller organizations that maybe don't have the same financial resources as larger organizations and companies do. One way that you can remedy that would be perhaps to offer a waiver or a tiered fee structure. But that is definitely one that we hear quite often as well. Engaging newer expertise can be a challenge for committees that have a lot of tenure and the membership hasn't changed much over the years. This is where we can employ some of the earlier recruitment tools that I discussed earlier. And last, we hear from the stakeholders that will not participate because they don't agree with perhaps a proposal. And again, it's important to highlight to them that while the proposal may not be to your liking, the output of that proposal could have an impact to your business. So you may be forced to live with the decisions made by others without being at the table. And it's better to be there and be part of the discussion and use your positions to influence the outcome of a standard that you can live with. Next slide. And that's all I have. Questions and comments, I welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So interesting. And I wanted to highlight that section related to essentially forming a recruitment team and considering a lot of different angles. And I also like the idea of leaning on your current membership, having it as a current agenda item to always be thinking about who else might want to be participating. And maybe you can build on that for us as to, do you provide them with like one pagers to give to other organizations? What kind of support would be helpful to help members do that?
Yeah, so thank you. Definitely the one pagers are key. We do see some committees are also developing templates for social media messages and guidelines on how to develop an impactful but truncated social media message that will hook somebody. Because as we all know, as you're scrolling through social media, you don't really engage in the long posts. It's got to be something that's impactful, that's short and to the point. So we do see a lot of those kind of guidelines and advice being given to TAG members, but really the one pager that can be tailored. So it's kind of a structure, an outline that you're giving to all your members that they can take, they can adjust it to whatever the situation is, to whomever the audience is. So if they're at a trade show, if they're at a different maybe meeting with industry people, if they're at an executive meeting, how can they have just kind of the outline of the messaging that includes the importance of the work being done in the committee, but really kind of touches on the things that the need to know and what's going to what's going to bring people to the table and highlight the importance of the work. So
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to all of our presenters today. And at this